All right, I thought we would start just to get going on one test, by the way, just to get us
great.
going. First off, this was going to test your vocal eloquence. You have to repeat after me from our play. The rain in Spain falls mainly in the plains.
Do I get to sing it?
You
The
do.
rain in Spain falls mainly on the plain.
I guess it was a little weak, but that's otherwise
okay.
It'll be great.
Well, my voice is weak.
So others will have already spoken to you about your family life, youth, the large middle mother years, I guess. And so what I'd like to talk about is the later years, the senior years,
Right.
if that makes sense. And speaking of those years, I don't want to define it in Dad's life, but even that set of years perhaps could be done in a set of three as we chronologically talk about it. Kind of the early retirement years, maybe the middle, and then the later years. So if we focus on the early retirement years, when would that be? Is that when he was 60, 65? How old were you?
He put in at about 63 to leave Sears after 35 years.
Mm-hmm.
And we debated about whether he should or shouldn't financially, all
Right.
the things you have to go through. But both of us realized that the way he was feeling, had he stayed, he wouldn't have made it much longer anyway.
Yeah.
So best thing to do was get out. And we felt we had enough assets that if we had to sell and do things like that because it didn't work, then we needed to do it. So that was what we decided to go on and take.
So you would have been right much younger then. So
I was
you're
about probably
55?
54 or 5, something like that.
Okay, all right. So in these years, if we start, you're 54, he's 62, and let's say that carries up until somewhere around 80, what were things like then? So there are a lot of people who have an adjustment period when someone retires. Did you have such a thing?
Well, of course, David was still at home. So,
At home, yeah. Okay.
So we still had a lot. Most of you all had gone to college, so we had that part. But we really actually had some still home, and so basically it stayed about the same, except he was home more. So
What did you do with all that extra time, though, sir? Certainly you didn't have to go to work, and at some point David did leave the house.
well, being retired yourself, you realize you don't have time after all. You thought you do, but you didn't know you had time enough to work. It was so busy afterwards. So we constantly stayed busy doing things, various things.
I know at one time you bought him a fishing pole to ensure that he had a hobby of some type. Was that because you wanted him to have a hobby, or he needed it, or what did you think?
I think it was just probably a gift because he was not a great big sportsman. He didn't want to go out and hunt and fish all the time. As you know, his main hobby was working around the house, working in the garden, doing repairs. He really enjoyed just doing things at the house. He didn't even care to travel. He didn't care to do a lot of things. So we did a little of it, but not much. But mostly, as I said, he enjoyed the garden and things of that sort and loved doing things that he could do right there. And one time, he loved sitting on the porch, of course. And I told him at one time, I said, well, you can sit on this porch the rest of your life, but I'm not going to do that.
Well, you had actually, though, at some point, David had left. You guys had time there. You picked up painting. Was it at that time or much later?
I have really forgotten when I did, but it probably was. It was probably somewhere after that time, I guess. I don't remember what year I started doing it. But
What made you decide to start?
I've always been interested in it, but I never had time, never thought I could do it, and still not that good with it, but I enjoyed it just the same. And it was a lot of fun. I would go hours on time downstairs by myself just painting while he was watching television upstairs.
Anybody watching or looking over your paintings that noticed you first started off, I think, with scenes, barns and such, and then you went into people, but you typically painted them from the backside. Why so?
Well, because faces are the hardest thing in the world to paint as far as I'm concerned. So as you know, the kids got a charge out of it and considered it my butt pictures because everybody turned around backwards to take it, and it was fun. But
what about your social life? So at this stage in your life, most, if not all, of your siblings and your friends are probably still alive and such. What did you do with
Well, that was,
friends and such?
we had 6 real close friends that we saw every weekend, saw them at church, saw them during the week, and they were our main social contacts, and we thoroughly enjoyed being with them till things changed in that line, of course. But we really, at first, when the kids were smaller, we had 3 close friends that we stayed with all the time. They were a different group of folks, but we were still friends with them till the end. But we cultivated about 6 others that we thoroughly enjoyed being with. And
The Renors, I think you used
yeah,
to
well,
take just day trips with them.
oh
or
yeah, we
something.
went on the mountain. We used to go up there, peaks and all around there every Sunday or so with Howard and Dorothy, and Pauline and Bill, and then of course before that, when we all got together at one house or the other, was Laban and Francis Arthur. They moved to Richmond, and after a while, and then Neil and John Murphy. We had about 4 or 5 close ones then. So
How much did you see your siblings?
I didn't see them that much because my sister Mary and Peggy were in Charleston, South Carolina, so I didn't get to see them except probably yearly. And then Shirley, we didn't visit Shirley a lot, but we talked with her.
Wasn't it in the early retirement years that you helped them recover from the hurricane?
Well, yeah, Mary had Hugo that hit there, and that was a traumatic thing for her. She couldn't even, after the island was torn up, she couldn't even go back
Down
until
the
they
Isle
had,
of Palms?
yeah, the Isle of Palms. She couldn't go back. The Ben Sawyer Bridge was gone, and it took them a long time to get back. But they had to repair and have the house ready and go 2 or 3 months before she was able to even go over. It upset her so.
What was wrong with the house?
Well, the water came in as far as halfway up the house, all the way up, and so all the floors were cut. They were wooden, they were hardwood. They buckled up. All of the furniture was gone. Really, I mean, it was warped. It was a mess. It all the way around. And of course, when you go through the town, just like you do in all the rest of these places, afterwards the debris was piled up higher than houses, where they had to take it off the island and dispose of it. So it was, like I said, a terrible time for them. And Wallace Bibb and Nana went down with us, took their camper, and Joan and I went down with them, and we stayed at Peggy's, my sister, and then Nana and he stayed in the camper, and we went over and worked on the house for them, and then Jeff, Betty's husband, came over and rebuilt all the kitchen. So anyway, they had lots of help, and Peggy's was not as bad as Mary's, but hers got real bad. So anyway.
You mentioned Wallace Bibb and the Pickrells and the Driscolls. And
Oh,
all of them.
absolutely.
One of the themes that runs through all of those, of course, is the church. What has the church life meant to you, and how was it in those early days?
Well, I think really the church was our social life as well as their religious life. I think it answered so many needs for us that today's world doesn't use it for. We did use it for that, and all of our closest friends were there, so and it branched from there out. But it meant a great deal, not only for social, but for religious purposes as well.
Right.
So,
What about family life? So at this point, I guess, early again in your retirement, by this point, you've probably had a number of weddings of your children and such. What was it like planning those with your daughters? You had 3.
well, if you didn't really go to the extreme you do now, and most people at that time had the weddings at the church. Therefore, stuff was already furnished as far as venue. Your friends helped, even on the reception part. They would help you either serve or bring food in and whatever. It was more of a country type thing, I guess, in a way, and closeness. And we had a certain amount of planning. Of course, you still had professionals for flowers and for photography and things of that sort. But they were much simpler and much more inexpensive than they are now. So, but they were still just as good, just as pretty. So.
Your your children grew up, had their own families, and then began to have their own children. So at about this time, you were probably a grandmother. I guess, I'm not sure when Sarah was born, but that would have been in the early stages of your retirement, if not even before that, perhaps. But by this point, you're having more grandchildren. What's it like to be a grandmother?
Well, Sarah being the first one, David was about 8 or 9 years old when Sarah was born. So I still had a kid at home, as well as having a grandchild. But it was a thrill to have the first one and to be with her, and along with all the rest of them as each one came along.
Were you able to be there at most of them when they were born?
The first
How was
ones,
that?
as the out of town ones, I didn't get to be there as much, of course. But David mentioned when his, of course, being the last ones, when Jackson came along, and of course it was one more after that of his, but when Jackson came, he said, well, I know it doesn't mean anything to you to have another grandchild. But I told him, I said, I don't care how many you have. They got their own little special niche right there, and each one. So it means something to have 17 of them. So
Is it, I guess, different in that you have them and can love and enjoy them, but you don't have to raise them, I suppose.
and then you send them home to mom and daddy.
How many do you have?
We have the 17 grands, and now we have, I think 10 is greats. So it's been great even having the greats. So.
Most would say you've been an exceptional grandmother. One of the things that you decided to do at some point about this time was to start the Christmas play at Christmas. What made you start thinking about that, and how did that come to being?
Oh, good gracious. I think it actually started because of snow. It was a deep snow one Christmas when David wasn't even born. I think you were probably about 5. And it was a deep snow, and we couldn't get out for Christmas, and we couldn't visit people. We could just be right there at the house. So in order to keep y'all amused, more or less, I thought, well, we'll do this. So we started having pantomime Christmas thing, and we invited my Aunt Dick next door, and Hazel, what she was called, and Harry down, and they trudged through the snow and came down to watch it, and we started it, and then we kind of stopped it for a good number of years, and I guess it was when the grandchildren came along we started it again. So it's probably been ever since 1960-something that we started it.
Interesting. So it started out of boredom to begin with.
Oh, absolutely.
And then from there.
And to teach what Christmas is all about. I mean, it's not just about your toys.
Right.
So that was kind of one of the reasons for doing it.
Do you hope the tradition continues?
I certainly hope so. I think that it probably will come to where each one will have to do their own type thing, because it's getting impossible now even to get everybody together. So it's going to certainly get more so as the family gets larger.
Enjoying the grandkids and the family. One of the things I do remember is you built a teepee one time. Do you recall that?
Oh, yeah, I
Tell me
recall.
about it.
Oh, it was just something that the grandkids were there. And, I think they would enjoy that. So we went out and fixed the thing in the backyard. And of course, we told the boys that it was kind of for them because the girls had other things to do and they wouldn't be allowed in with certain things. Well, they wanted to take pictures and go in and play some too. So the girls went in and the boys got very upset because that was supposed to be ours.
But it was, I think it was about a 6 or 7 foot structure, and
Yeah, it was pretty,
you used some
pretty
kind
tall.
of like brown paper,
Yeah,
or maybe it
we
was
just
bags around it. I
Yeah,
don't
some
know.
kind of brown bag stuff.
I think they
I don't-
decorated it, as I recall.
Oh yeah, we got them to paint the outside of it and do that sort of thing. So I think it served a purpose for when it was done.
Seems like you were intentional, finding a way to work with the kids when you had a chance to be
Well,
with them.
I enjoy working with them, so I think that's it. I enjoyed being with them and doing things with them.
So if we go to the middle section I would thought, and again, this is your reading, not mine, but at this point, health begins to deteriorate in some ways. And of course, the most significant of that was Dad's health seemed to deteriorate some, which probably changed things a little bit. At this point in the middle stage, I guess, of the senior years, you have some friends and siblings that are in ill health or perhaps passing away. both of you are alive, but physical health might be in decline, and your children, your family by this point have certainly left the nest. All of them are out of the house, and all of them are out of college and such. In that middle section then, how did relationships change? How did life in general change? Was it different from before, you think, or how was it?
Whose do you mean? Do you mean our
Your social network, your family, your relationships?
I think the way that ours changed is maybe, as you said, that the children were with their families, so ours increased more with the friends.
Mm-hmm.
We saw more of them, and we were together at least once or twice a week, just visiting, just sitting around, just doing nothing much, but just being together.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that as well as anything, and we're not big vacation takers or trips. We never cared about that too much, so we didn't do that sort of thing. But I suppose that's the main way it changed. But
one of the things for sure is that as your friends got older, as I began to see your life, you have been around whether it's older relatives or friends and family and siblings, a lot of people who have gone through their entirety of their lives on into their death. Was that jarring as your friends began to pass away, or did it feel just like a part of life? How did you handle that?
well, I think it is a part of life. I think you realize it. Of course, I tease and say, as far as my friends are concerned, I have to go to the cemetery to have my parties now because there's nobody left here to have a party with, because I'm the only one left in the crowd now. Myself and Pauline Renaud are the only two in the group that we have used to be with. But and we, of course, don't get to visit like we used to.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that it changes somewhat, but you accept change. I mean, what can you do? And it's not morbid. It's just facts of life.
I would have thought one of the harder ones was probably Bill Renoir's. Wasn't his more difficult to see?
I think that he and your dad, particularly, and me as well, had gotten real close with him.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like a family member really going. And Bill was so admirable with the way he handled things. It just, you could not help but admire him.
And he had what, Lou Gehrig?
Lou Gehrig's disease.
Which is what?
Is ALS, and it nerve muscle deterioration.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen him, he did not want help. I mean, he would struggle as long as he could to do his own thing. He and his friend who was in Washington were the ones that started the radar system in the weather situation. And so his friend and he were more inventors in a way of things. And so when he had the ALS, that his friend came up with, I don't know how many things that he could probably use in bath situations and things of that sort. And so just to see him handle something like that was very admirable. It really was.
Many of them, I guess, are buried up at Quaker, right?
Some of them are, yeah.
There's
about, well, actually, I guess about 6 of them are buried up there. 6
At
families.
this point, you have no blood siblings on your side or on Dad's side alive. Is that correct? Other
That's
than
correct.
maybe
Yeah.
Sister-in-laws, a couple
I
of
have
those.
2 cousins left.
Mm-hmm.
Two cousins left and 1 sister-in-law that are all really that are left. My mother's youngest sister, her 2 children are left, two children. She had 6,
Mm-hmm.
and 2 of hers are left, and myself. So we've lost this past year about 3 in the family.
Right.
So,
In that side, so some of those declining in terms of their numbers. On the other side, your immediate family has continued to grow. You've now got multiple in-laws and son-in-laws, and they now have children. The family has expanded from, what was at one time 5 children, and the 2 of you 7 to, I don't know now, 50, you think?
I think
Something
we
like
get
that?
together, there's either 51 or 2 of us, and they're all blood connected somewhere except for the spouses.
As they've expanded, they certainly have different interests and backgrounds and such. How have you been able to keep harmony in all of that group that's there?
Oh, I don't think I've done it. I think they've done it themselves. I really cannot take credit for any of it. I think that all of them do. I'm very fortunate feeling that they do not only seem to get along, but they seem to enjoy when they do get together, and that means a lot. And like I say, it's just their personalities. I had nothing to do with it, so I can't take credit for any of it.
You may be more of it than you think. So one of the things that happened, of course, in the middle stage of this is Dad's health declined. And though that affected him substantially, it also affected you a great deal as well. Talk about his health decline and what you guys had to do as he approached dialysis and other things.
Well, of course, we could tell, as I said, when he was even at work, he had heart problems. Well, he had 5 bypass before anything else started, so he had that to contend.
Was that before he retired or after?
There was 91, around 91 that he had that. So
I think it was
it was after he retired,
Right,
yes.
right.
But he did have that done, and then of course that affected his kidneys, and that's when he had to go on to dialysis. But
Well, what was that like? So that, for some who might be listening who don't know what that's like. So dialysis, of course, substitutes for your kidneys. Typically you go into a facility to do that work.
well, number one, I always thought the name for the kidney function was end-stage kidney disease. That's ED, whatever it is. Anyway, I thought it was a horrible name because when they tell you it's end stage.
Oh, end stage, as in the end of life
that's the
stage.
end.
Yeah.
I mean, but fortunately it was not the end for him. But it was taxing. Of course, Dr. Locke tried as long as he could not to put him on. And in fact, he had a heart attack as the reason he had to immediately go on because his numbers had gotten too high. And probably that's why he went into the attack. But anyway, it wasn't easy to go on it because we spent 4 to 6 hours every day for 6 weeks in the clinic with 3 nurses that came in and taught us how to do the machine. And we had a workbook that was this big and this thick that these women had written because they were the starting of the home dialysis. And they had written this book, and we had to go over that. It was how the machine worked, what it did, what the purpose of it was, each thing to put it together, how to do a catheter, how to take care of the catheter, how to fill vials full of blood from the catheter. A lot of nursing stuff, a lot of medical stuff.
Were you apprehensive when you began?
Oh, very much. I was apprehensive from the whole time.
How about him? Was he?
I think he loved it.
Is that right?
Well, he understood, too, the mechanics of the machine better than I think, and so he got it much quicker than I did on that. I did more of the medical part. I understood better, maybe, but it was quite involved, but fortunately, we did learn it, and because it wasn't easy, no, and it wasn't easy after you got home at times. But
well, why didn't you just go to the clinic and do it like so many others do? What was the benefit of doing it at home?
Dr. Lockridge's thoughts on it, and I agree with him 100%, was you're much better doing it at home. You're not where other people that are ill. You take it's almost, to me, was more like a natural elimination because you went every day. We went for 6, 7 days on it instead of 3 days a week. 3 days a week, by the time you got feeling fairly decent, it's kind of like chemo. You go back and you're sick again. And you felt better. He felt so much better. He was able to go right and do it. He would hook up at night, get up the next day, go work in the garden, do anything he wanted to do for years. And then he benefited so much from it. It's so much more, to me, healthy.
That's, in retrospect, certainly the case. They go with the average lifespan of people on dialysis is 3 to 5 years, I think, in a clinic. He was on it for
10 years.
10 years. So it was certainly better then. But take me back to the point where he had just had a heart attack. He was ill. He was at the clinic in dialysis. And you had to make the decision to go through the training. Did you think you might not make it through the training?
No, actually, when we went into the clinic, we were waiting to get on the home list because they couldn't take but so many to train them. So we waited a while, and that's why we did the in-center dialysis. But I think all along, in talking with their doctor, that he convinced us more or less, and we convinced ourselves that it would be worth a try.
And you trained for how long?
6 weeks we went every day, except for the weekend.
What was the first night like when you came home and without any of the nurses there? Though I understand they were on call. You could call them.
Yeah.
But here you are at home for the first time having to set up everything, which literally goes right into his blood vessels, right into his heart.
Right into his heart.
Yeah.
This catheter was connected totally to his heart. It wasn't even like the one in the arm.
And who had to connect that?
Me. What else? Well, it was. I was a little apprehensive, of course, but as I said, and as you mentioned, the support we had was remarkable. I mean, if I had any little tiny question, if I would call immediately within 3 minutes, they called you back, and they answered your call, or else see what they could, help you with. At first, it was a little bit more awkward because the machine answers, part of the time it was the machine, had to go all the way to Roanoke and even Ohio at one time. That's who you talked with. Then they had the people in town, service people, and that was so much better.
Did you name the machine?
We always named them different ones. Our first machine was horrible, and we had so many things wrong with it that it kept going off, and I was constantly calling. So finally I told them, I'm quitting. I'm not doing this. This machine, something is not right. I'm not doing it. So they came out, and Dr. Lockridge said, I think we need to take that machine and throw it in a gully across the house. It needs to be thrown away. So they gave us a machine that the guy that had trained with us had used, and it was fine. So definitely most of their problems were machine related at some of the time. Some of the time it was human error, but as you know, it was a few places.
This was a Fresenius machine, I think, and is it
Correct.
true that at one time the two of you were the oldest in North America that were on home dialysis?
I think the whole time that Dr. Lockridge was practicing, he always used your dad as an example in all of his talks, that he went all over the States and went overseas and had doctors come in from overseas that we talked with as well. He was considered the oldest one he had ever put on home dialysis.
It wasn't without risk. There was one night I thought that there was a bit of a leakage problem. Describe that.
I don't know whether anybody wanted to hear about that that's going to think about going on. But yes, there was. One night, the machine, when we hooked up the dialyzer, which was actually considered the kidney, it was this long cylinder, and you screwed top and bottoms on it. The bottom was apparently not screwed tightly, which would have been my error or his. I don't know who set it up that night. And anyway, so in the middle of the night, he woke me and he said, I feel cold. I don't feel good. I don't know, something's not right. And I said, okay. So I got up, I said, I'll go see if you need some saline or something of that sort. So I walked around to the machine, and the floor was covered in blood. It was just totally covered. The machine, the dialyzer had leaked all night long after I had hooked him up, which was probably 3 hours maybe, and had covered the floor, of course. So I immediately took care of that and took him off of the machine, and I called, and I gave him some saline first before I did that, because I think he was beginning to go into shock.
How did you know to do that?
I don't know. It was just automatic. I just felt like, if nothing else works, I guess you give him saline. I don't know. So anyway, I did, and when I called her immediately after that, and she called back, and she said, well, that was the best thing to have done, so just watch him. If he gets in other distress, then you have to go to the emergency room. But he didn't, and he survived it, and thank goodness for that.
Well, the whole experience, I think, was summarized at one point by him, as he said that later in his life, they asked him how it was, and he said, "Yeah, I feel great. I feel 75 again," I think was what he said.
Yeah.
Certainly you helped keep him alive for those years, that's for sure.
Well, I think it was the machine, Doc Locke, and the little help I gave, yes. But without Dr. Lockridge, I don't know what he would have done.
Transitioning to the third stage of the senior years then. So Dad wakes up one morning and obviously is in distress and passes away that day. I asked you one time what it was like to have a spouse die, and I think you said something on the lines of, it's like, hey, you left me.
Mm-hmm.
What's it like to lose a spouse?
I guess it depends on how close you are, and we were quite close. We did everything together. Wherever he went, I went. Wherever I went, he went. And we always needed each other to do that. I mean, we didn't say the need for it, but it was just one of those things you did.
Other than the very early years when I think you were recuperating from what was it? It was right after marriage. You had a
When I went to Catawba, you mean?
right. Other than that, when you guys were separated, then how many times do you think you guys didn't sleep in the same bed together over those years?
10 nights.
10 nights out of
Not over 64 years.
yeah.
Pretty much anyway, around that.
So traumatic to lose the spouse for sure. Irreplaceable, I know. What as you transitioned to that stage when you didn't have him around, how did you deal with what loneliness might come?
I think you just take a day at a time. I mean, it wasn't easy at first, in particular the very first. It was terribly hard. But with the help and the support of the family, each and every day, really, I talk with one or the other, particularly the girls here in town. I talk with every day, and with you guys as well, and the grandchildren. They constantly calling and getting in touch, and that's what really has brought me through. I know it has, because it's filled the void that's there. So
one of the things that was also familiar to you, because you had been going there since you were 12, was the place on Logan's Lane. Originally your aunt's place, and then you and Dad built the house there. Ultimately, you decided to move to Bethel Church for a variety of reasons, but how did you approach the decision to leave that, and what was that like, leaving a place that you literally built and had known since you were 12?
Well, it wasn't easy because there were so many roots there. I mean, as you said, from 12 years old, it had been home.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't easy, but I had gotten to the point that every time I looked at it and saw all those 5 houses around that outbuildings we had, and they were falling down, paint was holding them up. That was about all that was holding them together. And I knew something had to be done with them, or else it began to look real shabby. Excuse me. And so that, along with the fact that having the rental property, which I thoroughly appreciated my aunt leaving to me, and it certainly helped on income, but the clientele you got in the later years was different. And that meant fooling with things of that sort, keeping about 3 or 4 acres of grass cut, looking at those buildings, taking care of a 10-room house. It just got to be more than I felt I needed to do. So it was time, is what it amounted to make a move.
When you sold the property, one of the things that I did with your permission was to take down, I hope it was with your permission, to take down the barn. And I remember us standing there as Mike Ballou came out with his forklift, and he lifted off part of the edge of the barn, and then part of the roof collapsed. I looked over and saw you, and for the first time I saw you had a little tear in your eyes. You saw it go down. Why so?
Well, everything just came to me. It was just one of those times. Mm-hmm. As I say, the memories were there, and you knew there wouldn't be that.
Yeah. Now, when they came, we saw bulldozers pulled up, I think, at one point, and then I guess overnight they must have torn it down.
Ooh, that was awful.
Carol had gone by and she brought you back over there. What was it when you came back? It was...
Well, actually, when I went to church one Sunday, and they were in process of taking care of that place, and would go by there occasionally to see how much they'd done and what they hadn't. And I went by, and Dick's house was still there, the building was still there, my house was still there. And I went back the next Sunday, and they were all gone.
Yeah.
And it wasn't easy. But it was progress, they say. I don't know.
Going by there now, what's your sense?
Doesn't even hurt now.
Yeah.
Doesn't even hurt anymore because it's so different. And it's the way it was supposed to be, and it was. I knew it was going to be that way, but it doesn't hurt like it did.
One of the things we're dealing with now in contemporary times is COVID-19. So in addition to being by yourself from a fair amount, although Jenny lives with you and
Yeah.
we see you a great deal
Oh,
now
somewhat.
and such, COVID-19 has hit the country and required a lot of changes. How has that been living through a pandemic?
It's been miserable in a lot of ways for a lot of people, but not for me as much as a lot of people.
Really?
I mean, no, I think that I was already secluded somewhat. I was already not going out as much. I was already in a certain amount of by yourself time. So the people that in the education and all of these things that they've had to put up with has been horrible for most people, but it hasn't been good. I missed, like everything, being able to just get up and go and be with people when I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
But nothing like for me as it has been for most people.
You say getting up and go and being there. You do remain active. How so?
Just get up and go. What else can you do?
How long are you going to cut your grass?
Well, I'm hoping to at least go through another year anyway at this point, if the machine holds up. But as long as
Is
it's
the machine the tractor or you?
both, both. But mostly it's a tractor because it's getting older, and I don't think at this stage of the game that it would be wise to buy another one if this one went. So I more than likely would go with the service or
You
something.
do seem to want to maintain some level of activity. Do you have a plan each day, or do you have certain things you want to do, or how do you keep yourself mentally and physically engaged?
Well, mostly I try and have at least one thing or so that I've got to get up to do. It might be wash a window. It might be sweep a floor. Who knows? Very small. Not the extent that I used to do, but work outside a little bit. Maybe work out for an hour when I used to work out for 4 hours, but it's still there. But I try to keep something of that sort ahead each day. That at least get up, you got to do something.
Do you still drive?
So far,
How well?
how do I know? I think we need somebody else with me to say that. As far as I know, I do all right. Had no accidents yet, anyway.
I have seen you drive down the wrong side of the road once.
When
but
was that?
I don't remember. So, looking forward, are there other things that, other than going to the Kentucky Derby and going to New York, that you want to do?
Well, the reason I wanted to do those because it's just interesting, and I would like to go. I don't care about going to New York as such. I would like to see a nice play put on, a nice theater production that's professional put on. I've always enjoyed that, and I would I always thought I'd like to go to the Kentucky Derby because of the pageantry. I just think it's a lovely place, and when they sing the Old Kentucky Home, I just love it.
I think that's true. So, what advice do you have for people who would enter this senior elder age, whatever you would call it? Have you seen things change differently, or have you changed your approach in any way, or is it, what advice would you have?
I don't know that I would have any advice. I think each person has to handle that on their own. I mean, you know, my circumstances would be entirely different as to how I handle it. My help or my aid or my support would be different than a lot of people. So I don't think you can advise people. They have to just keep happy and keep busy, and that's all I know.
A couple of quick last questions, kind of a lightning round. Is there any particular foods that you like now?
No, not particular. I just eat the general amount.
Enjoy cooking?
Nope. Never did.
You have any favorite season in particular?
Oh, spring and fall, I think, are
Why
my
so?
favorite. Well, I think the change, I don't mind the changing of the seasons. I like one snow, but that's enough. Get through as Jenny said, when she came up from Georgia, and the first snow, she loved it. But the second snow, she said, I'm over it now. So I think that's kind of what one snow does it, and that'll be fine.
For entertainment, you own a TV, but you don't watch it much.
Nope.
I see a book beside you. How many books would you imagine you read in a year?
Oh, I don't know. Probably 70, 80, something like
Gracious.
that. I imagine I get about 7 every 2 weeks and read most of them.
And what are they on?
Just light novels. I'm not about improving my mind. I don't care a thing about finding out what I should be doing and deep. I'm not a deep reader. I'm a surface reader.
Something for enjoyment.
Absolutely.
I was with you at the bank, what was it, 2-3 years ago when we were looking at different investments.
Bound to
And
be.
the guy was impressed with you. He had only known you, just 15 minutes. Just a few minutes ago, I spoke to Don Winter, the guy who built our house at the lake. As I was concluding the conversation, hadn't spoken to him in 6 months, and he said, "Oh, how's your mother doing?" And he was interested in you.
Thank
Do
you.
you know how much you're loved?
Oh, I do. I can feel it. Yes. I feel it because of the reception I get from all the family. I mean, I think that's what keeps you going, is the love of everybody.
Well, we hope you keep on going
Well,
anyway.
thank you. I do too.
Thanks for the interview.
Thank
We
you.
love you.
Love you too.